The air was thick with the usual hum of a busy Saturday morning as shoppers bustled around Freshmart, an upscale grocery store nestled in a suburban neighborhood where luxury sedans lined the parking lot and designer handbags sat comfortably on the arms of shoppers. For Maya Turner, this was just another shift in a long string of weekend jobs. A college student working her way through school, Maya stood behind the cashier counter, carefully scanning items, counting change, and smiling politely to customers. Her dark curls were pulled back into a neat ponytail, and her brown eyes held a mix of determination and quiet resilience. Maya's life wasn't simple, but she wore her challenges well. Living in a modest apartment with her mother and younger brother, she balanced her time between her studies, shifts at Freshmart, and helping her family. Her mother's health had been fragile for years, and Maya took on extra hours wherever possible to contribute to medical bills and the household expenses. Despite the demands, she found moments of peace during her shifts, surrounded by the calming hum of everyday life as customers came and went. Today, Maya's smile was steady as she greeted each customer, her voice soft and polite. "Good morning, how are you today?" Her demeanor was professional yet warm, and she was well liked by her regulars who appreciated her efficiency and kindness. Freshmart was not the kind of place Maya would usually shop herself. It was pricey, the kind of store where organic was the norm, and everything was packaged with care. But she liked working here. She liked that the air was filled with fresh scents from the bakery, and she enjoyed the rhythm of the work, the familiar beeps of items being scanned, the thank yous and have a nice days that passed from one customer to another. In contrast to Maya's quiet morning, Karen Summers entered the store with the energy of a storm brewing just on the horizon. Karen was well known in the neighborhood, a middle-aged woman with a flair for fashion and an even stronger flair for what she called upholding standards. She was dressed impeccably in a crisp white blouse and pastel blue slacks, her hair styled to perfection, and her gaze sharp as it swept the aisles. Karen took pride in knowing her neighborhood inside and out, and she felt it was her duty to keep it pristine. If something was out of place, Karen was often the first to notice and to voice her concerns, loudly and often. As Karen walked down the aisles, filling her cart with meticulously chosen items, she observed the people around her, her mind filing away details. She frowned at a young man in a hoodie, his casual attire not quite fitting her mental image of a Freshmart customer. She watched him carefully as he moved to another aisle, her eyes narrowing. After a moment, she refocused on her shopping, glancing through her cart to ensure each item met her standards. Eventually, Karen's path led her to Maya's checkout line. Maya noticed Karen's approach but didn't react beyond her usual polite smile, greeting her with the same warmth she offered to every customer. "Good morning, Maya. Did you find everything you were looking for today?" Karen barely acknowledged her, placing her items on the conveyor belt with deliberate precision. As Maya began scanning them, Karen's eyes wandered over Maya's appearance, her name tag, her every movement, as though assessing whether this young woman fit her image of an appropriate cashier. Karen's gaze lingered uncomfortably, but Maya remained unfazed, her hands working automatically as she moved each item through the scanner. With the last item bagged, Maya offered the total with a polite, "That'll be $87.43, please." Karen reached into her designer handbag, extracting her wallet. She handed over a crisp $100 bill, her manicured nails brushing Maya's hand ever so slightly. Maya took the bill, running it through the scanner as she did with all larger denominations. The scanner beeped, and she noticed a faint crease on the bill. Holding it up to the light, she quickly verified its authenticity before placing it into the register. But Karen, noticing Maya's momentary hesitation, narrowed her eyes. "Is there a problem with my money?" Her tone was sharp, edged with an impatience that could quickly spiral into anger. "No, Ma," Maya replied calmly, "just checking as usual. Everything's fine." Karen's lips tightened. "As usual? Are you suggesting I don't have real money?" Her voice carried a hint of indignation, loud enough that a few customers in line glanced over, sensing a potential confrontation. Maya maintained her composure, keeping her voice steady and professional. "It's just a standard check we do for all large bills, Ma. Everything's fine with your payment." Karen, however, seemed unwilling to let the issue go. She leaned in slightly, her voice low but laced with accusation. "I don't see you checking other customers' bills. Are you implying something about me?" Her eyes bore into Maya, challenging her with an intensity that made Maya pause. "No, Ma," Maya replied, standing her ground but sensing the tension growing. "We just have procedures to follow. That's all. Procedures, Karen scoffed, glancing at the customers around her as though seeking allies. I've been shopping here for years and I've never seen someone treat a customer like this. She looked back at Maya, her eyes cold. Is it because you think I don't belong here? Maya was taken aback but chose her words carefully. I assure you, I'm only following the store's policy. There's no reason to take it personally. Karen's face hardened further, a flicker of something darker passing through her expression. Well, maybe I should speak to your manager, she said, crossing her arms defiantly. At that moment, the manager, Tom Hendricks, had noticed the tension and approached with a cautious smile. He was a middle-aged man with a kind demeanor, but he looked slightly wary as he approached Karen. Good morning, Is there an issue here? Karen immediately turned to Tom, her posture straightening as though ready for battle. Yes, there is. This cashier just accused me of using fake money. Tom's eyebrows raised slightly, and he glanced at Maya, who met his gaze with calm honesty. Is that true, Maya? No, Maya replied evenly, her eyes steady. I just checked the bill as part of standard procedure. There was no accusation. Karen scoffed, looking around as if the customers nearby would confirm her account. I don't care about your so-called procedures, it's offensive, and I don't appreciate being treated like a criminal. Tom tried to calm the situation, his tone placating. I'm sure there's just been a misunderstanding. Maya is a very diligent worker, and she follows store policy closely. I apologize if there's been any inconvenience. Karen wasn't appeased. She turned to Maya, her voice icy. This isn't about inconvenience. This is about respect. I don't appreciate being profiled. The word profiled hung in the air, casting a sudden heavy silence over the checkout area. Maya felt a pang of discomfort but held her composure, standing tall and unyielding. She had done nothing wrong, and she knew it. But the accusation was powerful, and the murmurs from nearby customers added to the tension. Maya replied gently, choosing her words with care. I assure you I didn't mean any disrespect. I'm simply doing my job. Karen shook her head, waving her hand dismissively as though Maya's explanation was irrelevant. She turned to Tom with a pointed look. I want something done about this. I don't expect to come here and be disrespected. This is my neighborhood. I've been a customer here for years and I deserve better than this kind of treatment. Tom's expression grew more uncertain as he glanced between Maya and Karen. He could feel the weight of Karen's words, the implication of her accusation hanging heavily in the air. He knew Maya was an exemplary employee, but he also understood the delicate balance required in handling situations like these. Let's all take a breath, Tom said gently, attempting to diffuse the situation. Maya, could you please go take a short break? Maya's heart sank, but she nodded, understanding the manager's attempt to ease the tension. She forced a small professional smile and nodded at Tom. Of course, she said, before turning and walking to the break room. As she left, she could feel the gazes on her back, some sympathetic, some curious, and others tinged with judgment. But she kept her head high, her posture calm, hiding the tumult of emotions bubbling inside her. In the break room, Maya leaned against the wall, taking a deep, steadying breath. Her heart pounded with a mix of anger and sadness, but she swallowed it down, refusing to let it show. She had encountered Karen types before, people who assumed things about her because of the color of her skin or her position as a cashier. She'd learned to let it slide, to not let it sink in too deep. But the sting lingered, a small bruise to her spirit that she would have to carry. Back at the counter, Tom continued to speak with Karen, doing his best to reassure her. I'm very sorry for any misunderstanding, ma'am. Please know that we value your business here. Karen sniffed, as though barely appeased. I certainly hope so, and I hope you do something about that cashier. I don't want this to happen again. As she left, the murmurs around the store faded, but the atmosphere remained charged, leaving Tom standing alone, feeling the weight of the incident and unsure how to proceed. With Karen's departure, the store returned to its usual hum of activity, but the impact of the encounter lingered. For Maya, it was another reminder of the world's unspoken judgments, a heavy weight on her shoulders as she returned to her shift, holding her head high despite the ache in her heart. The day would go on, customers would come and go, and Maya would continue to do her job as she always had. But something had shifted, a tension beneath the surface that would not easily fade, and the echoes of the encounter would stay with her long after Karen had left. Maya returned to her register, still feeling the weight of Karen's words and the stares from earlier. But as always, she composed herself, straightening her posture and refocusing on the task at hand. She had a job to do, and letting one interaction overshadow her shift wasn't an option. However, the discomfort lingered, a nagging unease in the back of her mind. Despite Maya's attempts to brush off the incident, the store felt different now. Some of the regulars who had witnessed the encounter looked at her with sympathetic eyes, offering gentle smiles or kind words as they paid. "Keep your chin up, sweetheart," one older woman whispered as Maya handed her receipt. Maya forced a smile, nodding in thanks, though the words barely made a dent in the heavy feeling that clung to her. Then, as the line moved forward, the sound of clicking heels echoed down the aisle, causing Maya's heart to skip a beat. She looked up and saw Karen marching back toward her, a determined look in her eyes. Behind her, a man trailed along, a middle-aged store security guard named Ron, who'd been working at Freshmart for years. Ron had a friendly, fatherly demeanor, always joking with the staff and often stopping by to chat with Maya on her shifts. But now, with Karen leading the way, Ron's face was solemn. His eyes met Maya's for a moment, a flicker of apology in them, but his gaze quickly shifted as Karen stopped in front of Maya's register, crossing her arms with a smug look. The other customers around them grew quiet, sensing the tension and eyeing the scene with a mixture of curiosity and unease. "Excuse me," Karen said loudly, ensuring everyone around could hear her. "I want this issue resolved. I don't think it's acceptable that I, a paying customer, was treated with suspicion and disrespect." Her voice was sharp, unwavering, and Maya felt a pang of frustration rise within her. Mom, Ron began gently, attempting to de-escalate. "I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding here." Karen scoffed, waving a hand dismissively. "No misunderstanding at all, Ron. This young woman." She gestured toward Maya with a sharp nod, accused me of using counterfeit money. "I know my rights, and I know what it feels like to be treated like a criminal. This kind of behavior is completely unacceptable." Maya inhaled slowly, resisting the urge to respond defensively. "Ma'am," she replied as calmly as she could, "I did not accuse you of anything. I simply checked the bill, as I do with all large denominations following store policy." Karen's eyes narrowed. "And yet, I don't see you checking everyone's bills, do I? Or is this a new policy reserved for certain customers?" She emphasized the word certain, her gaze piercing, hinting at the unspoken accusation that hung heavy in the air. "Ma'am, we check bills over $50 for all customers," Maya said, her voice steady but firm. She looked to Ron, hoping he would back her up, but he remained silent, casting a nervous glance toward Karen. Karen turned to the growing crowd of onlookers, raising her voice to make sure they could hear. "You see, this is exactly what's wrong here. We live in a community that prides itself on integrity, but it seems that certain people," she gave Maya a pointed look, "feel entitled to judge who belongs here and who doesn't. I won't stand for it." The people in line exchanged looks, some sympathetic to Karen, others visibly uncomfortable. A few nodded along with her words, subtly reinforcing her stance. Maya could feel her face grow warm, but she held her ground, refusing to let Karen's words shake her. "Ma'am," she said, her tone as professional as she could manage, "I can assure you my only intent was to follow procedure." Karen's face twisted with frustration. "You're not listening. This isn't about your so-called procedures. This is about respect. I don't come here to be treated like a criminal. You owe me an apology." Maya hesitated, feeling the words sticking in her throat. Apologize? For what? For doing her job? For following the rules? But the expectant gaze of the crowd, the simmering tension around her, made her realize that any refusal would only add fuel to Karen's fire. Just as Maya opened her mouth to respond, Tom, the manager, stepped in again, his face lined with worry. "Ma'am, please, let's try to settle this without making a scene." Karen whipped around to face Tom, her expression indignant. "A scene? I'm not the one causing a scene. I'm the one who's been wronged here, treated like a common thief. If you think I'm going to let this go, you're mistaken." She raised her phone and with a quick tap, began recording. "People need to know about this. This is the kind of disrespect that should be exposed." Tom's face paled and he held up his hands. "Ma'am, There's really no need for that. Oh, there absolutely is, Karen snapped back. It's clear to me that certain standards have slipped in this store, and I intend to hold everyone accountable. Maya felt her heart sink as Karen turned the camera on her, recording her face. The subtle murmurs of the crowd grew louder, and Maya could feel herself becoming the focal point of everyone's attention. Karen kept the camera trained on her, a smug look on her face as she continued. "So, young lady," Karen said, her voice filled with condescension, "would you like to explain to everyone here why you thought I was using counterfeit money? Or do you think it's appropriate to profile people based on how they look?" Maya's throat tightened. She took a deep breath, meeting Karen's gaze directly. I'm simply following store policy. That's all." Karen let out a sharp laugh, tilting her phone to capture Maya from different angles. "Is that so? Well, I think everyone here can see the way you handled this. People like you don't belong here if you're going to treat customers with such disrespect." The crowd was silent, the weight of Karen's accusation hanging in the air. But then, a voice broke through the tension. "Excuse me, but I don't think that's fair." It was an older gentleman, a regular customer who frequented the store every Saturday. He stepped forward, his expression stern as he looked at Karen. "I've been coming to this store for years, and Maya has always been courteous and professional. I've seen her check bills before. This isn't unusual." Karen's mouth tightened, her eyes narrowing at the man. "Are you saying I'm lying?" The man shook his head. "I'm saying that you're overreacting. I think we can all see that Maya is just doing her job." Karen's face flushed with anger, but before she could respond, another customer chimed in. "I agree," a woman said, crossing her arms. "Maya's always been respectful. I don't think she deserves this kind of treatment." Maya felt a glimmer of relief, her heart lifting slightly as these customers came to her defense. But Karen was undeterred. She turned her camera toward the crowd, capturing the dissenters with a glare. "Well, isn't this interesting?" she sneered. "Some people clearly don't care about community standards. They'd rather defend someone who has no respect for paying customers." Maya took another deep breath, clenching her fists beneath the counter. She wanted to respond, to explain herself, but she knew that anything she said would only add fuel to Karen's fire. Tom placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, a silent reassurance that he was there, but the tension in his face betrayed his discomfort with the situation. Tom said cautiously, addressing Karen with as much politeness as he could muster. "I really think we should take a step back here. Maya is a valuable employee, and I believe this has all been a misunderstanding." Karen turned her glare on Tom. "A misunderstanding? Is that what you're calling it? Because to me this looks like a blatant case of profiling, and I don't intend to let it slide." The murmur of voices grew louder, and Maya could feel the weight of the accusations pressing down on her. She glanced at Ron, hoping for support, but his face remained neutral, clearly caught in an uncomfortable position. The confrontation had drawn the attention of nearly everyone in the store, and Maya felt trapped, with no way to escape the suffocating gaze of the crowd. And then, in a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, Karen pulled out her phone once again, scrolling through her contacts. "I think it's time to get some real accountability here," she announced, her voice loud and commanding. "I'm calling the police." Maya's heart sank as Karen pressed the call button, her voice ringing out in the silent store. "Yes, I'd like to report an incident of profiling and harassment at Freshmart," she continued, giving her account of the situation in exaggerated detail, casting herself as the victim and Maya as the offender. Tom's face paled further, and he glanced at Maya with a look of helplessness. "Maya," he murmured, "maybe you should step aside for now, just until this is resolved." Maya swallowed, feeling the knot in her throat tighten. She nodded, stepping away from the register, her mind reeling. She could barely process what was happening, the surreal feeling that she was somehow trapped in a nightmare she couldn't escape. She walked toward the break room, her steps slow and heavy, each step echoing the weight of Karen's accusations. Inside the break room, Maya leaned against the wall, taking slow, deep breaths. She could feel the sting of tears in her eyes, but she blinked them back, refusing to let them fall. She couldn't believe that such a minor interaction had escalated to this. that her simple act of following store policy had somehow turned into a scene of public humiliation. She closed her eyes, willing herself to stay calm. She thought of her mother, of her little brother, of the people she worked so hard to support. She couldn't afford to lose this job over something so ridiculous, over a misunderstanding blown completely out of proportion. The minutes ticked by slowly, each one stretching into what felt like hours. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she heard the muffled sounds of police sirens outside, and her heart sank even further. The police had arrived. Back on the store floor, the officers entered, and Karen greeted them with a look of triumphant satisfaction. She quickly launched into her version of events, painting herself as the victim of blatant discrimination and profiling. She described Maya's actions with vivid detail, embellishing her story with words like disrespectful and unprofessional while insisting that her only goal was to ensure community standards were upheld. The officers listened with solemn expressions, nodding along as Karen spoke. When she finished, they turned to Tom, who nervously confirmed some details but attempted to downplay the severity of the incident. And then, finally, they asked for Maya. Maya emerged from the break room, her heart pounding as she approached the officers. She kept her expression neutral, meeting their gazes with as much confidence as she could muster, though she felt the weight of Karen's accusations pressing down on her. One of the officers began, "We just need to ask you a few questions about the incident. I'm sure we can get this all sorted out quickly." Maya nodded, her voice steady as she replied, "Of course, officer. I'm happy to answer any questions." And so, standing in the middle of the store, surrounded by onlookers and under the intense scrutiny of both the officers and Karen, Maya began recounting her side of the story. She explained the store's policies, described her actions in detail, and made it clear that she had not intended any disrespect. The officers listened carefully, nodding as she spoke, and Maya could see a flicker of understanding in their eyes. But the tension remained thick, and she knew that, despite her best efforts, the outcome of this situation was far from certain. The two police officers, Officer Blake and Officer Ramirez, listened intently as Maya explained her side of the story. She held her hands at her sides, fingers interlaced to keep them from shaking, as she recounted each step she had taken with Karen greeting her, ringing up her groceries, taking the $100 bill, and checking it as per store policy. Her voice was steady, but inside her heart raced as she felt the weight of everyone's attention on her. "I'm not sure why there's been such an escalation," Maya said softly, looking from Officer Blake to Officer Ramirez, "but I did what I do with any large bill, just ran it through the scanner to check. That's all." Karen scoffed loudly from behind the officers, arms crossed over her chest, her foot tapping on the floor in annoyance. "As if that's all she did," Karen said, her voice filled with indignation. "She singled me out. She didn't check anyone else's money, just mine. And you know why? Because she assumed someone like me doesn't belong here." The officers glanced back at Karen, who continued to glare daggers at Maya. Officer Blake's face remained neutral as he turned back to Maya. "Can you confirm, Ms. Turner, if you were following protocol? Do you check all large bills from customers?" Maya nodded. "Yes, sir. It's a part of the store's policy. I'm expected to check all large bills." "And you're saying you've never refused service to a customer because of a suspicion of counterfeit money?" Officer Blake pressed. Maya shook her head firmly. "No, sir. I don't have the authority to refuse service. If there's an issue, I alert the manager." The officers exchanged glances and Officer Ramirez's gaze softened slightly, but Karen quickly interjected, not willing to let the moment pass. "Oh, come on," Karen sneered, addressing the officers. "Are you just going to take her word for it? I don't know why you're letting this." This attitude slide, her voice had shifted from indignation to something sharper, more condescending, a tone that grated on everyone around. Maya held her ground, keeping her expression calm, though each of Karen's words felt like a slap. She knew Karen was goading her, hoping for a reaction, but she refused to give Karen the satisfaction. "I am just following policy," Maya repeated, her tone even. "If there was any disrespect felt, that was never my intention." Karen's nostrils flared. "Oh, please. You know exactly what you were doing," she spat. "Making people like me feel unwelcome. This is discrimination, plain and simple." Officer Ramirez stepped forward, addressing Karen directly in an attempt to cool the rising tension. "Ma'am, I understand you feel that way, but we're here to assess the situation fairly and objectively. If Ms. Turner is following store policy, there's no indication of wrongdoing on her part." Karen's jaw tightened. "So that's it? You're just going to let her get away with this? I'm the one who's being humiliated here." Ramirez's gaze flickered with a hint of impatience, but he kept his tone neutral. "Ma'am, it's our job to ensure fairness. Please let us continue our questioning." Karen rolled her eyes and huffed, crossing her arms more tightly. Some of the customers watching shook their heads at her theatrics, while others whispered among themselves. Ron, the security guard, who had stayed nearby, shifted uncomfortably, clearly regretting his decision to follow Karen to the register in the first place. Officer Blake turned back to Maya. "Do you mind if we verify some of your employment details and store policies, Ms. Turner? We just want to ensure we understand everything properly." Maya nodded, though the request felt almost humiliating. She understood their position, but it felt strange to have her simple job protocol questioned in such a serious way. Still, she kept her composure, reminding herself that she had nothing to hide. Tom, the store manager, came over, visibly nervous as he approached the officers. "Officers," he began, swallowing nervously, "I can confirm that Maya was following standard procedure. All our cashiers are required to check any large bills, especially anything $50 or more." Karen's eyes narrowed, her gaze darting between Tom and Maya. "And I'm supposed to believe this? I've shopped here for years, and I've never seen anyone else have to do that." Tom rubbed his temples, clearly uncomfortable, but he kept his voice steady. "Ma'am, I assure you this is the policy we follow. Maya was doing her job." Karen scoffed, rolling her eyes. Of course she'd take her side. "The whole store seems to be against me." She looked around, trying to catch the eyes of other customers, as though seeking allies, but most of them averted their gaze, clearly tired of her antics. Seeing Karen's dissatisfaction, Officer Blake decided to take another approach. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "are you saying you felt that this interaction was based on anything other than standard policy?" Karen didn't hesitate. "Absolutely. This young woman," she pointed at Maya, "singled me out. She looked at me like I didn't belong here, like I was some kind of outsider trying to pass fake bills." Maya's chest tightened, but she kept her face impassive. She couldn't afford to let Karen's words affect her. She had learned long ago that people like Karen thrived on seeing others react, on finding ways to twist a situation until they were the victims. "I assure you that's not true," Maya said, looking the officers in the eye. "I treat all customers equally. I don't make any assumptions about anyone." Officer Blake nodded, taking in her words. "Understood, Ms. Turner," he turned back to Karen. "Ma'am, can you give us any concrete evidence that would suggest Ms. Turner's behavior was discriminatory?" Karen's face flushed, her mouth opening and closing as she struggled to find a response. "Well, I mean, it's just obvious, isn't it?" she sputtered. "I shouldn't need evidence. Can't you see it?" Officer Blake raised an eyebrow. "Without specific evidence or witness testimony to support your claim, Ma'am, we're left with no grounds to pursue further action." Karen's face went pale. "So you're saying my word means nothing? That this cashier can treat me however she wants and I just have to accept it?" Ramirez sighed, trying to maintain his patience. "Ma'am, we understand that you feel strongly, but we need to operate on facts and evidence." Karen huffed and crossed her arms again, clearly unsatisfied. She gave a final glare toward Maya, who remained composed, her gaze steady and unwavering. "Fine," Karen finally said, her voice trembling with frustration. "But I won't forget this. I have plenty of friends in this community, and believe me, they'll be hearing about this." She shot one last glare at Maya, then turned on her heel and marched out of the store, her footsteps echoing in the now silent aisle. Once Karen had left, Officer Ramirez exhaled, looking visibly relieved. He turned to Maya, his expression softening. "Ms. Turner, thank you for your patience. I apologize for the stress this may have caused." Maya gave him a small nod, her voice calm. "Thank you, officer. I understand you had to do your job." Blake nodded as well, his demeanor professional. "You handled yourself very well under the circumstances. We appreciate your cooperation." Maya offered them both a polite smile. "Thank you. I'm just glad it's over." The officers gave one final nod to Maya and Tom before turning to leave the store, the tension slowly dissipating in their absence. Maya let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding, her shoulders finally relaxing. Tom placed a hand on her shoulder, giving her an encouraging smile. "You did great, Maya. I'm sorry this happened." Maya nodded, though her smile was tight. "Thanks, Tom. I'll be fine." But as she stood there, alone at her register, a wave of exhaustion washed over her. She had faced moments like these before, but this one had been particularly intense. And though she tried to shake it off, Karen's accusations echoed in her mind, lingering like a bruise that hadn't yet fully formed. Back in the store, the customers resumed their shopping, but the incident lingered in the air, whispers and murmurs flitting between people as they picked out their groceries. A few regulars came up to Maya, offering words of encouragement or apologizing for what she had been through. One older woman, Mrs. Jenkins, who often came in for her weekly groceries, placed a gentle hand on Maya's arm, her eyes filled with sympathy. "Don't you let her get to you, dear," she said softly. "Some people just need to feel important no matter who they hurt. You're a good girl, and we all see that." Maya's heart swelled with gratitude, and she managed a genuine smile. "Thank you, Mrs. Jenkins. That means a lot." Mrs. Jenkins patted her hand affectionately before moving on, her kind words a balm on the wound Karen had left behind. As the day wore on, Maya tried to shake off the incident, focusing on her tasks and putting on her best customer service smile for each person who came through her line. But deep down, the experience gnawed at her, a lingering reminder of the challenges she faced as a young black woman in a world that often saw her through the lens of suspicion. When her shift finally ended, Maya collected her things and left the store, stepping out into the cool evening air. She let out a long sigh, her breath visible in the crisp night air. The world outside the store felt different, a quiet escape from the chaos that had unfolded within. She took a deep breath, letting the cold air fill her lungs, grounding her in the present moment. As she walked to her car, she thought about Karen's words, the anger and indignation in her voice, the way she had twisted the situation to make herself the victim. Maya had encountered her share of difficult customers before, but there was something about Karen that was harder to shake off. The entitlement, the disdain, the way she had looked at Maya as though she were less than human. But as she climbed into her car and started the engine, Maya reminded herself of who she was, of the values she held close. She thought about her family, her mother and brother who relied on her, and the sacrifices she had made to be where she was. She thought about the future she was working toward, the dreams she held on to despite the obstacles in her path. And as she drove home, she allowed herself to release the weight of the day, letting go of Karen's accusations, her anger, her bitterness. She would face other challenges, other moments that tested her strength, but she knew that she would continue to rise above them, one day at a time. Because in the end, Maya understood that her worth wasn't defined by people like Karen. Her strength came from within, from the resilience she had built over years of facing adversity and coming out the other side stronger than before. And no one could take that away from her. As Maya drove home, the events of the day continued to echo in her mind, each moment replaying with a vividness she couldn't shake. The intensity of Karen's accusations, the scrutiny from the officers, and the silent stares of bystanders, all of it left a mark, like ink that seeped too deep into the fabric of her memory to ever fully wash out. She gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles white against the dark leather, focusing on the quiet hum of the road beneath her tires to steady herself. Finally, she reached her apartment complex, a modest building nestled on the edge of town. The lights in the windows glowed warmly in the evening darkness, a familiar sight that brought a sense of calm after the storm of the day. She parked, sat in the car for a few moments to collect herself, then took a deep breath before stepping out. She forced herself to relax, mentally brushing off the weight of the incident as she walked up the stairs to her unit. Inside, she was greeted by the comforting familiarity of home, her mom's neatly arranged living room, the faint scent of lavender from the candle burning on the coffee table, and her younger brother's sneakers scattered by the door. Her mother, Angela, looked up from the couch where she was knitting, her warm smile fading as she took in Maya's expression. "Maya, honey, are you okay?" Angela asked, her voice gentle but filled with concern. Her mother knew her better than anyone. She could sense that something was wrong before Maya even said a word. Maya hesitated, unsure how much she wanted to share. She didn't want to worry her mother, especially given her health issues, but she also felt a desperate need to let out the tension that had been building inside her all day. Finally, she sank onto the couch beside her mother, feeling the weight of the day press down on her. "I'm okay, Mom," she said softly, though the words felt like a lie. "Just had a rough day at work." Angela's eyes softened, and she set down her knitting to take Maya's hand, squeezing it gently. "Want to tell me what happened?" Maya bit her lip, the emotions she'd kept tightly bottled up threatening to spill over. "There was this customer," she began slowly, her voice trembling slightly. "She accused me of giving her fake money, of disrespecting her, even of profiling her." Her mother's eyes widened, and she shook her head in disbelief. "Oh, Maya, I'm so sorry. That must have been awful." Maya nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Yeah, the worst part was she called the cops. They came to the store and questioned me like I'd done something wrong." She looked down, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. "I tried to explain, but it felt like I was already guilty in their eyes, you know." Angela's grip on her hand tightened, her gaze filled with empathy and a sadness that Maya recognized too well. Her mother had faced similar challenges in her own life, dealing with discrimination and judgment that had left scars, not only on her but on Maya's understanding of the world. It was an unspoken bond between them, a shared resilience forged through adversity. "Oh, Maya," Angela whispered, pulling her daughter into a gentle embrace. "I'm so proud of you for handling it with such grace. I know it's hard, but remember, people like that, they don't define who you are." Maya leaned into her mother's embrace, feeling a small measure of comfort in her warmth and steady presence. But deep down, she couldn't shake the bitterness that lingered, the frustration that even now, even after she'd done nothing wrong, she was left carrying the weight of Karen's accusations. She pulled back slightly, her gaze thoughtful. "I just don't understand why people like her feel so entitled," Maya murmured, her voice tinged with a sadness that she couldn't quite hide. "Why they feel the need to tear others down." Angela sighed, a distant look in her eyes. "Some people need to feel powerful, Maya. They think that by diminishing others, they're elevating themselves. It's a sad way to live, but it's not your burden to carry." She reached out, brushing a stray strand of hair from Maya's face. "Your strength comes from within, honey. Don't ever let people like her make you question that." Maya nodded, her mother's words soothing some of the rawness inside her. She took a deep breath, allowing herself to let go of some of the anger, to release the tension that had wrapped itself around her heart. She knew her mother was right. She couldn't let Karen's actions define her. But as she sat there, a flicker of resolve sparked within her, a quiet determination to rise above, to stand strong, even when others tried to bring her down. The rest of the evening passed in a quiet, comforting routine. Maya helped her mother with dinner, catching up on her brother Jaden's day at school, allowing herself to be absorbed in the warmth of family. For a while, the shadows of the day's events faded, replaced by the familiar sounds of laughter and conversation, the soft glow of the kitchen light casting a sense of peace over the room. But later, as she lay in bed staring up at the ceiling, the weight of the day returned, settling over her like a dark cloud. She thought about the customers who had watched the confrontation, the bystanders who had offered their sympathy but hadn't intervened. She thought about the officers, their skeptical eyes as they questioned her, and the emptiness in their apology once it became clear she was in the right. She thought about the way Karen had looked at her, with a disdain and entitlement that went deeper than a simple misunderstanding. And then, finally, she thought about herself, about her strength, her resilience, and the choice she faced now. She could let this experience leave a scar, a bitter reminder of the ugliness she had faced, or she could use it as fuel, a motivation to push forward with even greater determination. With a quiet sigh, Maya made her choice. She would rise above it, just as her mother had taught her, just as she had always done. She would continue to live with kindness, to treat people with the respect and dignity they deserved, no matter how others treated her. Because in the end, that was who she was, a young woman with strength that went beyond the surface, with a heart that refused to be hardened by the cruelty of others. As she closed her eyes, she whispered a silent promise to herself. She would not let this experience define her. She would continue to be her true self, to hold her head high, to to walk with dignity and grace. Because she knew that her worth was not defined by people like Karen, it was defined by the love and strength that filled her heart, by the resilience that had carried her through every challenge she'd ever faced. And with that promise, she drifted into a peaceful sleep, her heart lightened by the quiet determination that filled her soul. The next morning, Maya arrived at Freshmart with a renewed sense of purpose. The previous night's reflection had steeled her resolve. She wasn't going to let Karen's accusations haunt her, nor would she allow the shadows of yesterday to follow her into today. She straightened her name tag, took a deep breath, and walked confidently into the store, offering polite greetings to her coworkers and regular customers as she moved to her register. The morning hours passed smoothly, though she noticed subtle glances from some customers who had witnessed the incident. A few offered her warm smiles and whispered words of encouragement, while others avoided eye contact, perhaps embarrassed by their silence during Karen's tirade. Maya appreciated the kindness from those who reached out, even if it was in small ways. It helped her feel grounded, reminding her that there were people who saw her for who she was, not through the lens of Karen's twisted perception. But as the afternoon approached, something unexpected happened. Tom, her manager, approached her register, his face drawn and serious. He cleared his throat, glancing around before speaking in a low voice. "Maya, could you step into the office for a moment? I'd like to discuss something with you," he said, trying to keep his tone casual, though Maya could sense the tension in his words. Maya's stomach tightened, a ripple of unease washing over her. Had something happened? Was this about Karen again? She swallowed, nodding. "Of course, Tom. I'll be right there." She followed Tom through the aisles to his office, her heart pounding with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. As she entered, she noticed Ron, the security guard, sitting in a chair across from Tom's desk. His expression was unreadable, and his presence only heightened Maya's sense of unease. Tom gestured for Maya to sit, then closed the door, leaving them in a hushed silence. He took a seat behind his desk, folding his hands and taking a deep breath before looking at her. "Maya," he began carefully, "I wanted to talk to you about yesterday's incident with MS. Summers Karen." Maya tensed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She had hoped that Karen was behind her, that the store would move on from the incident as she had. Is something wrong, Tom?" Tom exchanged a look with Ron, who nodded subtly. "Well, something unexpected has come up. After Karen left yesterday, we received a few calls. Some were complaints from her friends, but others, well, they weren't exactly complaints." Maya raised her eyebrows, confused. "I don't understand." Ron leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. "After Karen stormed out, several customers came to me privately. They shared concerns not about you, but about her." Maya's eyes widened slightly, caught off guard. "Concerns? About Karen?" Tom nodded. "Yes, it seems that she has a history of causing disturbances in several local stores, especially in cases where minority employees are involved." The words hung in the air, filling the small office with a strange mix of tension and revelation. Maya blinked, struggling to process what she was hearing. Karen, her accuser, her antagonist, was the one with the troubling history. I don't understand," Maya said quietly, her voice filled with disbelief. "So she's done this before?" Ron nodded, his expression serious. "Apparently, yes. A few customers even mentioned specific incidents at other businesses where Karen has made similar accusations and called the police on employees, claiming she felt threatened or disrespected each time. The situations turned out to be misunderstandings, or worse, exaggerations on her part." A surge of anger and relief washed over Maya, mingling in a confusing tangle of emotions. She had endured Karen's wrath, her baseless accusations, and the humiliation that came with it, all because of a woman who had a pattern of this behavior. A strange sense of vindication flickered within her, but it was quickly overshadowed by frustration at the injustice of it all. "Why didn't anyone know?" Maya asked, her voice trembling slightly. "If she's done this before, why is she allowed to keep doing it?" Tom shook his head, looking visibly troubled. "I wish I had a clear answer, Maya. These kinds of accusations are hard to pin down, especially without substantial evidence. And unfortunately, people like Karen, they know how to manipulate the system, how to turn situations to their advantage." Maya clenched her fists, trying to suppress the frustration that bubbled up inside her. She thought back to the way Karen had stared her down, how she had twisted Maya's professionalism into an attack on her own character, leaving Maya defenseless in the face of her accusations. The injustice of it all was almost overwhelming. Ron continued, his voice calm but firm. Maya, I want you to know that we've taken steps to make sure this doesn't happen again. Tom and I have documented yesterday's incident and spoken with witnesses who corroborated your account. If Karen or anyone else tries to pull something like this again, we'll have the evidence we need to protect you. A sense of relief washed over Maya, mingling with the lingering bitterness. Knowing that her managers were willing to stand up for her, to support her even in the face of Karen's baseless accusations, was a comfort she hadn't anticipated. Thank you, she said quietly, her voice filled with gratitude. It means a lot to know you believe me. Tom nodded, a faint smile breaking through his otherwise serious expression. We absolutely do, Maya. You've been an outstanding employee, and we value your dedication and professionalism. Don't ever let someone like Karen make you doubt yourself. Maya nodded, taking a deep breath to steady herself. For the first time since the incident, she felt a genuine sense of relief, as though a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She wasn't alone in this. She had allies, people who saw her for who she truly was and were willing to stand by her. As she rose to leave, Tom called after her, his voice gentle. Maya, I know this has been difficult, but please remember you handled yourself with dignity. That's something no one can take away from you. Maya smiled, a quiet gratitude in her eyes. Thank you, Tom. I'll remember that. With a final nod, she left the office, feeling a renewed sense of purpose as she returned to her register. She knew that the path ahead wouldn't be easy, that there would always be challenges, moments of unfairness and prejudice that she would have to navigate. But she also knew that she had the strength to face them, the resilience to rise above, no matter how hard others tried to bring her down. A few days later, the incident at Freshmart began to spread around town. Word traveled quickly in a small community, and Karen's behavior had left a bitter impression on those who had witnessed it. Customers and locals alike shared their versions of the story, each retelling adding another layer of detail and perspective. Some sympathized with Maya, expressing outrage at Karen's baseless accusations and applauding Maya's grace under pressure. Others, particularly those in Karen's social circle, tried to downplay the incident, dismissing it as a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. But regardless of the interpretation, one thing became clear: Karen's reputation was beginning to tarnish, and the community was taking notice. Then, one evening, a social media post appeared online. A local journalist who had heard about the incident through various channels shared an article detailing Karen's history of targeting employees in the service industry, especially those from minority backgrounds. The article recounted several incidents, each one eerily similar to what had happened at Freshmart: accusations of disrespect, calls to the police, and public outbursts that painted Karen as the victim. The article spread quickly, sparking outrage and disbelief. Readers were shocked by the pattern of behavior, many questioning why it had taken so long for Karen's actions to be called out publicly. Some commenters expressed support for Maya, lauding her bravery and resilience, while others condemned Karen's actions, calling for accountability and change. For Maya, the article was both a vindication and a strange form of justice. She had never sought public recognition, never intended for her experience to become a symbol of something larger. But as she read the comments, the messages of support, and the stories from others who had faced similar challenges, she realized that her experience had resonated with people in ways she hadn't anticipated. In the days that followed, Maya received messages of encouragement from people around town, including some who had been in the store that day and had witnessed the incident firsthand. Customers approached her at Freshmart, offering words of kindness and gratitude, expressing their admiration for the way she had handled herself. And then, one afternoon, as she was finishing up her shift, a familiar face appeared at her register. It was Mrs. Jenkins, the elderly woman who had offered her words of support during the incident. She placed a small bouquet of flowers on the counter, her eyes warm with affection. "These are for you, Maya," she said, her voice soft. "For your strength, your dignity, and the kindness you show every day." Maya's eyes filled with tears and she managed a grateful smile. "Thank you, Mrs. Jenkins. That means so much to me." The older woman reached out, squeezing Maya's hand gently. "You're a bright light in this world, Maya. Don't ever let anyone dim that." Maya nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. She realized, in that moment, that she had found something precious in the midst of the turmoil, a community that saw her, valued her, and stood by her. And as she held the flowers close, she knew that she would carry their support with her, a reminder that she was not alone. In the weeks that followed, Karen's presence in the community began to wane. She no longer frequented Freshmart, avoiding the store and its patrons who had witnessed her behavior. Her once confident demeanor was replaced by a sense of wariness, as though she could feel the weight of the town's disapproval bearing down on her. For Maya, life returned to a comforting normalcy. She continued her studies, worked her shifts, and spent time with her family, but there was a newfound sense of resilience within her, a quiet strength that had been forged through the trials she had faced. She knew that challenges would continue to arise, that there would always be moments of struggle and unfairness, but she also knew that she had the power to face them head-on, to rise above with grace and dignity. And as she stood at her register, greeting each customer with a warm smile and a genuine kindness, Maya knew that she had found her place not just in the store, but in the hearts of those who had come to know her, to respect her, and to appreciate her for who she truly was. A few more days passed, and life at Freshmart slowly settled back into its usual rhythm. The community buzz surrounding the Karen incident had not fully dissipated, but with each passing day, Maya felt herself growing stronger, more resolute. It was a strange feeling, to be so at peace after such a difficult experience, but Maya was determined to hold on to it. Then, one evening, as she finished up her shift, she noticed an unfamiliar figure standing by the customer service counter. It was a young woman, perhaps in her late 20s, dressed casually but with an air of confidence that made her stand out. She held a notebook in one hand and a camera in the other, her gaze scanning the store as though she were looking for someone. Maya felt a flicker of curiosity as she walked past, but she didn't stop until the woman noticed her and stepped forward with a warm smile. "Hi, excuse me," she said, her voice friendly. "Are you Maya Turner?" Maya hesitated, her guard instinctively going up. She'd had enough attention over the past week to make her wary of new faces. "Yes, I am," she replied cautiously. "Can I help you?" The woman extended a hand. "Hi, Maya. My name is Nina Davis, and I'm a journalist with the Community Post." She paused, gauging Maya's reaction. "I've been following the recent story about the incident with Karen Summers, and I was hoping you'd be willing to share your side of it." Maya's heart skipped a beat, and she glanced around, feeling the eyes of a few nearby coworkers on her. She'd never thought her experience would attract this level of attention, especially from the media. Her initial reaction was to decline, to avoid reliving the incident any more than she already had. But something in Nina's expression was kind, genuine, and it softened Maya's defenses. I'm not sure," Maya replied, her voice hesitant. "It was a difficult experience, and I'm not sure if I want to revisit it." Nina nodded, her expression understanding. "I completely understand. My goal isn't to sensationalize what happened. I'm more interested in highlighting the resilience and strength you showed and the broader impact it's had on the community. People are paying attention, Maya. They're listening. And I think your story could help others who have faced similar challenges." Maya considered Nina's words, her mind racing. She'd never thought of herself as a symbol of resilience, nor had she ever imagined her experience could serve a purpose beyond the personal. But if sharing her story could inspire others, if it could shed light on the importance of treating everyone with dignity and respect, then maybe it was worth it. "All right," she said quietly, her decision solidifying. "I'll talk to you." Nina smiled, a look of relief crossing her face. "Thank you, Maya. I really appreciate it. If you're comfortable, I thought we could chat somewhere private." They found a quiet spot in the break room, and Nina set up her notebook and recording device, giving Maya a reassuring nod before beginning. "Thank you again, Maya, for sharing your story. Just speak from the heart, there's no pressure." Maya nodded, taking a deep breath before starting. She spoke of the incident, recounting Karen's accusations, the shock of having the police called on her, and the humiliation of having to defend herself against baseless claims. As she spoke, she felt the emotions resurface: frustration, sadness, and the lingering disbelief that someone could behave so callously. But she didn't stop there. She talked about her mother's words of wisdom, the support from her coworkers, and the kindness of strangers who had reached out to her. She spoke of the strength she had found within herself, a strength she hadn't fully recognized until she was tested by the incident. People like Karen, Maya said thoughtfully, they try to bring others down, to make them feel small. But I've learned that their actions don't define me. What matters is how I choose to respond, and I choose to respond with kindness, with resilience. Nina nodded, jotting down notes, her eyes reflecting admiration. That's beautifully said, Maya. Thank you for sharing so openly. Maya smiled, feeling lighter than she had in days. She realized that by sharing her story, she was not only healing herself but also offering a voice to others who had been silenced by similar experiences. It was a small victory, but one that felt deeply meaningful. A week after the interview, Maya's story appeared on the front page of the Community Post. The headline read, "Grace Under Pressure, a local cashier's story of strength and resilience." The article recounted the incident in vivid detail, but it also highlighted Maya's courage, her determination to rise above, and her choice to respond with dignity rather than anger. The article struck a chord with readers, sparking conversations throughout the community. People shared their own stories of overcoming adversity, of facing discrimination and prejudice with courage and integrity. The story became a rallying point, a reminder of the importance of treating one another with respect and compassion. As Maya read the article, she felt a surge of pride, a quiet satisfaction that went beyond personal validation. Her story had become something bigger than herself. It had become a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the face of injustice, one could choose to stand tall. But the impact of the article didn't stop there. A few days after its publication, Tom called Maya into his office once again. She entered, curious and a little nervous, wondering if there was another unexpected turn awaiting her. Tom smiled as he motioned for her to sit. "Maya, I wanted to share some good news with you." Maya raised her eyebrows, intrigued. "Good news?" He nodded, a twinkle in his eye. "After the article was published, we received a call from the regional manager. He was deeply moved by your story and impressed by the strength you showed. He wanted to personally thank you for your dedication and professionalism." Maya's heart swelled with pride. She had never expected recognition from anyone beyond her immediate circle, let alone from higher-ups in the company. "That's not all," Tom continued, his smile widening. "He also approved a promotion for you. You're now our new assistant manager." Maya's jaw dropped, her mind reeling with disbelief. "Assistant manager," she repeated, barely able to believe her ears. She had dreamed of advancing in her job, but she'd always thought it was years away, something she would have to work tirelessly to achieve. Tom chuckled at her stunned expression. "Yes, assistant manager. You've earned it, Maya. Your hard work, dedication, and the way you handled yourself during that incident, it all showed what a valuable asset you are to this store." Maya's eyes filled with tears, and she quickly blinked them away, a radiant smile spreading across her face. "Thank you, Tom. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he replied warmly. "Just keep being the remarkable person you are." In the following weeks, Maya settled into her new role with pride and determination. She took on new responsibilities, managing her team with empathy and professionalism, earning the respect of her colleagues and customers alike. Her experience with Karen had left a mark, but it had also shaped her into a leader who understood the importance of compassion, who valued the dignity of each individual she worked with. Karen, on the other hand, became a topic of hushed conversation in the community. She continued to frequent other stores but avoided Fresh Mart, likely embarrassed by the notoriety her actions had brought her. Her reputation had been tarnished, and though Maya did not revel in Karen's downfall, she felt a quiet sense of justice knowing that people like her could no longer act with impunity. One afternoon, as Maya was organizing inventory in the back room, she heard someone call her name. She turned to see Nina, the journalist, standing in the doorway, a warm smile on her face. "Nina." "Hi," Maya greeted her, surprised but pleased to see her. "Hi, Maya. I just wanted to stop by and see how you're doing," Nina replied. "I've been following the community's response to the article, and it's been amazing to see the support you've received." Maya nodded, a grateful smile spreading across her face. "It really has been incredible. I never expected this much kindness, and it's made all the difference." Nina's expression grew thoughtful. "You know, your story has inspired more people than you realize. I've received messages from readers who said that your experience made them feel seen, that it gave them hope. You've touched lives, Maya, in ways that go beyond this town." Maya's heart swelled with gratitude and a sense of purpose she hadn't fully grasped until now. Her journey, her trials, and her resilience, they had all come together to create something meaningful, something that transcended her own experience. "Thank you, Nina," Maya said softly, her voice filled with emotion. "I'm so grateful you told my story." Nina smiled, reaching out to squeeze Maya's hand. "Thank you for letting me. And remember, Maya, your story doesn't end here. This is just the beginning." As Nina left, Maya felt a renewed sense of resolve, a quiet strength that resonated deep within her. She knew that her journey was far from over, that there would be more challenges, more moments of struggle and growth. But she also knew that she had the power to rise above, to meet each challenge with courage and grace. And as she returned to her work, her heart filled with hope, Maya knew that she would carry her story with her, a story of resilience, of dignity, and of a strength that could not be broken. She would continue to stand tall, to lead with kindness, and to inspire others to do the same. Because in the end, Maya's worth was defined not by the actions of others, but by the strength she held within. And that was a truth that no one, not even someone like Karen, could ever take away. As word of the article spread and the community rallied around Maya, Karen found herself unexpectedly on the receiving end of whispers, stares, and silent judgment. The local coffee shop she frequented, the boutique she loved, even her yoga class, each place felt different now. People no longer greeted her with warmth. Instead, their glances lingered, holding a strange mixture of curiosity, discomfort, and for some, barely concealed contempt. Karen tried to ignore it, convincing herself that it was all in her head. She told herself she hadn't done anything wrong, that Maya had been the one to overreact, that her actions had been justified. But the constant scrutiny began to chip away at her defenses, each silent look a small crack in the carefully constructed walls of her self-righteousness. One afternoon, as Karen entered her favorite coffee shop, she noticed the barista, a young woman with a friendly smile, look away, her expression shifting as Karen approached the counter. "Good afternoon, Karen," the barista said, her voice flat, devoid of the warmth Karen was used to. Karen bristled, suddenly feeling awkward as the barista took her order. "I'll have my usual," she said, her tone curt, as if reclaiming her usual confidence could erase the discomfort gnawing at her. The barista nodded, ringing her up without making eye contact. As Karen waited for her drink, she noticed two women seated by the window, both of whom were whispering and casting furtive glances in her direction. Karen felt her face heat up, the shame and embarrassment finally beginning to sink in. She pretended not to notice, keeping her gaze fixed on the barista, but the stares and whispers continued, a constant reminder that her reputation had been tarnished. When the barista handed her coffee over the counter, Karen muttered a quick thank you before hurrying out of the shop. She could feel the weight of the gazes following her, the whispers like prickling thorns, embedding themselves deeper with each step she took. Outside, Karen paused, taking a deep breath to calm herself. She glanced around, suddenly hyper-aware of her surroundings, the familiar streets and shops no longer feeling like her sanctuary. Everywhere she went, it seemed, there were reminders of what she had done, the consequences of her actions unfolding in ways she hadn't anticipated. She remembered the article in the community post, the story that had made her the town's newest pariah. At first, she had brushed it off, dismissing it as exaggerated or biased. But as she had seen her friends, neighbors, and acquaintances react to it, she began to understand just how deeply her actions had impacted the community and herself. In the days that followed, Karen's isolation grew. Invitations to social events became scarce, old friends stopped returning her calls, and even her closest confidants seemed to distance themselves, reluctant to associate with someone whose reputation had been so publicly tarnished. One evening, feeling particularly isolated and desperate, Karen decided to visit her best friend, Lily. They had been friends since high school, sharing countless memories, late-night conversations, and secrets. Karen had always considered Lily her closest ally, someone who would stand by her no matter what. As she pulled up to Lily's house, Karen felt a wave of relief, hoping that this visit would be a chance to vent, to share her side of the story with someone who would understand. She knocked on the door, her heart pounding, a nervous energy coursing through her. Lily answered, her expression a mix of surprise and discomfort. "Karen." "Hey." Karen forced a smile. "Hi, Lily. I was hoping we could talk." Lily hesitated, her gaze flickering away for a brief moment before she stepped back, gesturing for Karen to enter. "Sure, come on in." Karen walked inside, the familiar warmth of Lily's living room offering a momentary respite from the cold reality of her social isolation. She sat down on the couch, looking around as though the familiarity of Lily's home could somehow undo the weight of the judgment that had followed her everywhere. Lily sat across from her, her expression cautious. "What's on your mind?" Karen swallowed, her voice trembling slightly. "It's this whole situation with Maya," she began, her tone defensive. "People are treating me like I'm some kind of villain. It's not fair, Lily. I was just trying to make sure that I wasn't getting scammed, and now I'm the bad guy." Lily listened, her expression growing tense. When Karen finished, Lily sighed, her gaze steady and unyielding. "Karen, I need to be honest with you. This isn't just about what happened with Maya. It's about how you've treated people, how you've acted without thinking about the consequences." Karen's face fell, a defensive anger flaring up inside her. "You're taking her side? After everything we've been through?" "It's not about sides," Lily replied firmly. "It's about accountability. I've known you for years, Karen, but lately it feels like you're out of touch with reality, like you don't see how your actions impact others." Karen felt her chest tighten, a mixture of shame and frustration boiling over. "So you're abandoning me too, just like everyone else?" Lily's gaze softened, but she didn't back down. "I'm not abandoning you, Karen. I'm asking you to look at yourself, to really understand why people are reacting the way they are. Maybe this is a chance to grow, to be better." Karen's anger simmered, but she could see the honesty in Lily's eyes, the genuine concern beneath the tough love. A part of her wanted to lash out, to deny everything, but another part, a quieter, more vulnerable part, felt the truth of Lily's words. She looked away, her voice softening as the defensiveness began to fade. I didn't think it would go this far." "Sometimes we don't realize the impact of our actions until it's too late," Lily replied gently. "But that doesn't mean we can't change." For the first time, Karen felt a flicker of introspection, a quiet awareness of the damage her actions had caused, not just to Maya but to herself and her relationships. She realized, perhaps for the first time, that her behavior had consequences she could no longer ignore. After a few moments of silence, she rose to leave, offering Lily a brief nod. "Thank you, Lily. I'll think about what you said." Lily smiled softly, her eyes filled with a mixture of compassion and hope. "Take care, Karen." In the days that followed, Karen found herself grappling with an unfamiliar feeling: regret. She replayed the incident with Maya in her mind, each detail growing sharper and more painful with every recollection. The defensiveness that had once been her shield began to crumble, replaced by an uncomfortable self-awareness that left her feeling exposed and vulnerable. But even as Karen began to confront the reality of her actions, the consequences continued to unfold. She received a letter from her homeowners association, informing her of a pending review regarding her behavior, as multiple residents had filed complaints citing her as a disruptive presence in the community. The association was now considering whether she should face penalties or even lose certain privileges within the neighborhood. Her social circle continued to dwindle, her once loyal friends slipping away one by one. They no longer wanted to be associated with someone whose name had become synonymous with entitlement and prejudice, whose actions had left a stain on the community's image. Karen's world, once filled with certainty and control, now felt small, fragile, and isolating. She spent her days avoiding the places she had once frequented, choosing instead to stay indoors, hoping to escape the judgment that followed her every step. But even in the privacy of her own home, she couldn't escape the echoes of her actions, the lingering shame that had settled over her life like an unwelcome shadow. Then, one evening, as she scrolled through social media, she stumbled upon a video. It was a clip recorded by a bystander during the incident with Maya, one she hadn't realized had circulated widely until now. In the video, she watched herself, her face contorted with anger, her voice sharp and cutting as she accused Maya, demanding respect without a shred of it for the young woman in return. Watching herself from an outsider's perspective, Karen felt a sickening wave of realization. She saw for the first time the ugliness of her actions, the entitlement, the arrogance, the utter disregard for another person's dignity. It was as if she were seeing a stranger, someone she didn't recognize but could no longer deny was a reflection of herself. As the video ended, Karen sat in stunned silence, her phone slipping from her hands. She felt hollow, the weight of her actions pressing down on her with an intensity she could no longer ignore. The truth of who she had become was staring back at her, and she could no longer hide behind excuses or blame others for the consequences of her choices. In that moment, Karen felt the full impact of her public humiliation, not as a victim of circumstance but as the architect of her own downfall. She realized, painfully and profoundly, that she had lost not only the respect of her community but a part of herself in the process. And as she sat alone in the dim light of her living room, Karen knew that no apology, no attempt to explain or justify, could undo the damage she had caused. The road to redemption, if there was one, would be long and difficult. It would require her to confront the parts of herself she had spent a lifetime hiding, to accept the consequences of her actions without expecting forgiveness or sympathy. And though the path ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear: Karen could no longer run from the person she had become. For the first time in her life, Karen was forced to look inward, to face the uncomfortable truths she had spent so long avoiding. It was a painful, humbling experience, but it was also a necessary one. Because only by acknowledging her flaws, by accepting her mistakes, could she begin the difficult journey of becoming a better person. As the days turned into weeks, Karen's absence from the community became noticeable, her once prominent presence reduced to a mere memory. The town moved on, rallying around Maya and embracing the values of kindness, respect, and integrity that she embodied. And for Maya, the ordeal with Karen became a symbol of resilience, a reminder of the strength she had found within herself and the support she had gained from her community. Karen's public humiliation, though painful, served as a powerful lesson for herself, for Maya, and for everyone who had witnessed the unfolding of her downfall. It was a reminder that actions have consequences, that kindness matters, and that even the smallest choices can leave a lasting impact on the lives of others. And as Maya continued to thrive, supported by the love and respect of her community, Karen was left to grapple with the emptiness of her own choices, a stark reminder of the price of arrogance and the power of humility. Maya continued to work at Freshmart, but her role had evolved far beyond that of a cashier. As the assistant manager, she now had a new set of responsibilities that brought her closer to her team, overseeing operations, solving problems, and connecting with customers on a more personal level. Her influence had grown, and she had become a respected figure, someone her coworkers admired not only for her work ethic but also for the strength she had shown during her public ordeal with Karen. One afternoon, as she organized stock in the back room, she heard a familiar voice at the front of the store. She stepped out to find Mrs. Jenkins, the older woman who had always been a source of encouragement, standing near the checkout counter, clutching her purse and looking around for someone. "Mrs. Jenkins," Maya called, her face lighting up with a smile. The elderly woman turned, a warm smile spreading across her face. "Maya, dear, there you are." Maya approached, taking the woman's hand gently. "Is everything all right?" "Oh, yes, Mrs. Jenkins assured her, patting Maya's hand. "I just wanted to come by and see how my favorite assistant manager is doing. I'm so proud of you, Maya. You've come so far." Maya's heart swelled with gratitude. She had come a long way, but having someone like Mrs. Jenkins acknowledge her growth made it all the more meaningful. "Thank you, Mrs. Jenkins. That means a lot to me." Mrs. Jenkins leaned closer, her gaze kind but serious. "You know, Maya, you're an inspiration to this community. What you went through. It opened a lot of eyes. People are talking about kindness, respect, and standing up for what's right because of you." Maya felt a rush of warmth and humility, her gaze softening. "I just did what I had to do, Mrs. Jenkins. I didn't do anything special." Mrs. Jenkins shook her head, her voice resolute. "Oh, don't downplay it, dear. You showed strength when many would have given in to anger or despair. And that's what makes you special. You didn't just endure, you inspired us." As Mrs. Jenkins spoke, Maya realized how deeply her experience had impacted not only her own life but the lives of those around her. The incident with Karen had been painful and humiliating, but it had also ignited a conversation within the community, a dialogue about how people treated one another and the hidden prejudices that lingered in even the most seemingly tolerant spaces. When Mrs. Jenkins left, Maya returned to her duties, but her mind was buzzing with thoughts. Her journey had become something bigger than herself, a catalyst for change in the community. She had never asked for this role, but she felt a sense of responsibility now, a commitment to uphold the values she believed in and to continue being a force for good in her community. Meanwhile, Karen's life had taken a very different turn. After the incident and the ensuing backlash, she had retreated from the public eye, choosing to isolate herself rather than face the scrutiny and judgment of her former friends and neighbors. Her once proud reputation had crumbled, leaving her with few allies and a deep sense of shame. One evening, Karen sat alone in her living room, the soft glow of the television casting shadows across her face. She had spent weeks in this same cycle: wake up, move through her day in a daze, avoid the places she once frequented, and retreat home to hide from the world. She had become a ghost of herself, haunted by the echoes of her past actions, the bitter taste of her own arrogance and entitlement. As she scrolled through social media, she saw a post from the community post featuring an article titled, "The Power of Kindness: How One Woman Inspired a Community to Embrace Empathy." She knew, without opening it, that it was about Maya. For a moment, Karen felt the familiar surge of resentment, the bitterness that had become her constant companion. But then, something else surfaced: an ache, a quiet longing she couldn't quite define. She realized that Maya had become everything she had once aspired to be: respected, admired, and loved by her community. Karen's shoulders slumped, her gaze dropping to her hands. She couldn't deny it any longer. She was the architect of her own downfall. Her actions, her entitlement, her disregard for others' dignity had led her to this place of isolation and regret. She had lost friends, respect, and even her own sense of self. And for what? A fleeting sense of superiority? A need to feel powerful at the expense of others? The realization left her feeling hollow, a deep sadness settling over her. She understood now that she could no longer blame anyone else for her actions. She had to take responsibility, to face the truth of who she had become, if she ever hoped to find peace. With a heavy heart, Karen made a decision. It was one she had avoided for weeks, but now, with the weight of her own regret pressing down on her, she knew it was the only way forward. She would apologize to Maya. She didn't expect forgiveness, didn't expect anything more than the chance to acknowledge the pain she had caused. But it was a step she needed to take for her own healing. The next day, Karen found herself standing outside Freshmart, her heart pounding as she stared at the entrance. The familiar sight of the store brought a rush of memories, a mix of nostalgia and shame. She took a deep breath, gathering her courage, and stepped inside. The store was busy, customers browsing the aisles and employees moving about with purpose. Karen felt out of place, a stranger in a space that had once felt like an extension of her identity. She approached the front counter, her gaze scanning the store for Maya. Finally, she spotted her. Maya was helping a customer with a warm smile, her expression calm and focused. Karen felt a pang of envy mixed with admiration. Maya exuded a quiet strength, an inner grace that Karen had always lacked. As Maya finished with the customer, she looked up, her eyes meeting Karen's. For a moment, they both stood frozen, the weight of their shared history hanging between them. Karen could see the surprise and perhaps a hint of wariness in Maya's gaze. "Maya," Karen began, her voice soft, uncertain. She took a tentative step forward, her hands trembling slightly. "Can I speak with you? Privately?" Maya regarded her for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded, gesturing toward the employee break room. "Let's go back here." They walked in silence, Karen feeling the nervous energy building with each step. When they reached the break room, Maya closed the door, folding her arms and leaning back against the counter. Her posture was relaxed, but her eyes were sharp, observant. Karen took a deep breath, struggling to find the words. "Maya, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I wanted to tell you that I'm sorry, truly. I acted terribly, and I hurt you in ways I can't fully understand. I was wrong, and there's no excuse for what I did." Maya remained silent, her gaze steady, waiting for Karen to continue. Karen's voice grew thick with emotion. "I've spent the past few weeks realizing how much harm I've caused, not just to you, but to myself and to the people who used to care about me. I know that what I did is unforgivable. And I don't expect you to give me a second chance. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to change." Maya studied Karen, her expression softened by a hint of empathy. She could see the sincerity in Karen's eyes, the vulnerability of someone who had finally faced the truth of their own flaws. She didn't know if she could ever fully forgive Karen, but she understood the courage it took to come here. to apologize without expecting anything in return. "Thank you for saying that," Maya replied gently, her tone calm but firm. "It means a lot to hear you acknowledge what happened." Karen nodded, a small flicker of relief crossing her face. "I don't expect things to be different between us, but if there's ever anything I can do to make amends, please let me know." Maya offered a faint smile. "Just focus on treating people with respect, Karen. That's all anyone can ask for." Karen nodded, feeling the weight lift from her shoulders as she absorbed Maya's words. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a path forward, a chance to start over, however small. She felt a strange sense of peace, a quiet acceptance of the long road ahead. They parted ways, Maya returning to her duties and Karen leaving the store with a newfound sense of purpose. It would be a long journey to regain her self-respect, to build a life rooted in humility and compassion. But Karen understood now that true growth required facing her own mistakes, acknowledging the pain she had caused, and choosing to be better, day by day. For Maya, life continued with a sense of fulfillment and purpose that went beyond her job. The community had embraced her as a symbol of resilience, and she had found strength not only in herself but in the support of those around her. The experience had taught her that even in the face of injustice, she had the power to choose her response, to hold on to her dignity and self-respect. Maya's story had inspired others, sparking conversations about kindness, empathy, and the importance of seeing each other as human beings, worthy of respect. The impact of her journey reached far beyond Freshmart, touching the lives of people throughout the town and beyond. And as she continued her path, Maya carried with her the quiet knowledge that she had turned a painful experience into a force for good. She had shown that even in the face of adversity, one could choose to rise above, to meet hate with strength, and to transform hurt into healing. Because in the end, Maya understood that her true worth was not defined by others but by the kindness and resilience within her own heart, a strength that no one could ever take away.